Hello and welcome to Mrs. Gramier's Civil Rights Unit Plan. You can access my unit plan by going to www.gramiercivilrights.weebly.com. The Civil Rights in the United States Unit Plan will be geared toward the 11th grade and will be focused on the subject area of U.S. history. You'll notice that I have here a photo that is showing a nonviolent protest organized by students at the Woolworth lunch counter in the South. Many of these protests occurred to protest the Woolworth department store's policy of segregation at their lunch counters. One of these nonviolent protests is just an example of the nonviolent protests that we will be discussing during this unit plan. I've also included a quote from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. that says, "The time is always right to do what is right." Under our unit summary, I have listed that in this unit, you will examine the largest social movement of the 20th century. This will be one of the most important lessons this year, as America's dark history with race relations is still prevalent today. The struggle for equal rights is present through every aspect of the history of the United States, from colonization to present day. You will use primary documents, readings, and activities to imagine what life was like from Reconstruction at the end of the Civil War to the Jim Crow South, to understand why so many people were willing to risk their lives to change it. You will analyze key individuals, concepts, ideas, and movements to gain an appreciation for the feelings, emotions, and personal gain or loss felt by Americans of all races during the Civil Rights Movement. You will connect these feelings to the court cases that shaped the concept of segregation and separate but equal at the end of the 19th century and first half of the 20th century, as well as the court cases that would attempt to right those wrongs in the latter half of the 20th century. Finally, you will apply what you have learned to an equal rights campaign of your own, where you will take the principles of nonviolent action to a present-day issue. One of the main reasons I chose the civil rights as my unit plan is it is such an important issue in the United States, as I just mentioned, and it shows because it is its own California content standard. Under the 11th grade, it's under 1110, students analyze the development of federal civil rights and voting rights. So 2 through 6 are the content standards that I chose to focus on in my unit plan, and I was pretty proud that I was able to get so many in there. I have also included a photo here, which is a pretty iconic photo of the Million Man March, and this is where Dr. Martin Luther King famously spoke as well. The big ideas are going to focus around the basis of prejudice, the role of law, the judicial system, and invoking social change during the civil rights movement in the 20th century. Also, the ways that it invoked social change for the negative, and then how it tried to change that change in the latter part of the 20th century. I also want the students to be able to focus on today and being able to recognize what issues we still face today, what issues have mutated into other issues today, and what issues maybe are gone but not forgotten. The students' main themes during this unit will be to analyze the Supreme Court cases, to demonstrate that they understand what roles the court played in segregation and separate but equal, and then in overturning those original decisions, as well as be able to answer questions about key leaders of the civil rights movement like Dr. Martin Luther King and others. I also want them to be able to identify protest tactics and the policies of nonviolence, because as you can see here from the photos I included of Black Lives Matter and then Charlottesville, these issues are still very prevalent today, and it's important for people to be able to present their views in a constructive way and in a nonviolent way. And so Dr. King's lessons will be important for them to learn. Starting with the assessment, actually, I just want to show here that our assessment plan timeline, that in the entry level, when the project's work begins, and then in the middle, when they're working on the project, and then after the project is completed, that we have handout and questions and surveys that we're going to be going through. I also have set up a graphic organizer and information on the research paper that we will be focusing on. And at the very beginning, students are going to click on this link to take a survey, which I don't think it's going to let me go there because I've already apparently taken the survey. But if anybody has a chance to go by my website and take the survey to see what parts and aspects of the civil rights that you already know, this is going to be a good way for me to kind of determine what the students, what we're starting with. So going to lecture 1. Lecture 1 is going to be focused on the Supreme Court of the United States decisions, otherwise known as SCOTUS. The most important part of the SCOTUS decisions is what the courts were asking themselves during each one of these cases, and that is, does liberty and equality have the same meaning? When SCOTUS makes decisions, they're making decisions based on the Constitution, and that is a really important question within the United States Constitution. Here I have a timeline where I show all of the Supreme Court decisions that relate to civil rights and that we will be discussing that's appropriate for high school students. There are a couple of other cases that are not necessarily appropriate to discuss with high school students. That's something that they will probably focus on more when they get to college. I did not include them in my presentation. Each one of these, as they go through the presentation, will open up and it will give information about that Supreme Court case, and it will also give them the link to go to the oyez.org case page where they will be able to read the case in its entirety and also kind of a little bit more about it. They also have not only the decisions of the case, but they have also the dissents written by the justices as well, which are really interesting. To go along with the civil rights Supreme Court case lecture, I have a guided notes that I will have the students follow along with, and then on the website here, they can come here and download the file if they want to go back or they want to rewrite or do whatever they want to do with it. But I think I pretty much have my guided notes to be geared towards the Supreme Court of the United States timeline pretty well. So a lot of the videos and a lot of the graphics that I have included here are going to be included on my guided notes. In lesson 2 for their Weber size lesson, in their Weber size lesson, we're going to be discussing Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. We're going to be discussing during this unit a lot of important figures during the Civil Rights Movement, but I think that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. is probably the most recognizable and the most important and the most applicable to talking about the protests that would apply to today, especially being nonviolent, because we obviously want to teach nonviolence. During this Weber size, the students are going to be able to access a few different websites and be asked to answer questions on those websites. The first being the King Institute at Stanford University is going to be a really important resource for them. As this page shows you, this is the major Dr. King events chronologically, and there's also links to other people that it mentions and events and locations that they can click on to get a little bit more information as they go through it. So it's an interactive tool as well, and then they'll be able to answer these questions. The I Have a Dream speech link that I provided, I find is to be really, really, really interesting. It not only plays music of the civil rights and has the audio of Dr. King's speech when he spoke it live, but it shows some of his notes on the primary source materials, and they can go and look at just the written text. They can go back and forth where need be. They can skip around. There's a lot of different aspects of interesting material on this page. I'm also providing them the letter from Birmingham jail primary source document as well. You can go Google online and you can get this document, printed in text anywhere, but I think it's really important for the students to look at the actual primary source material, because I think it's really a lot more impactful when you do it that way. So those are those two, and they'll be able to answer questions on them. And then there's also the King Center, which is the center that teaches his nonviolent philosophy. And so there's a lot of resources here as well, and a lot more background information so that students can get more information, as well as they show some of the private collection photos of Dr. King if they want to learn a little bit more about his life and kind of see the events that he was involved in. In lesson 3, this is when they're going to put together the graphic organizer for their presentation. It's important for them to be able to put this graphic organizer together because their equality campaign is where they're going to, essentially they're going to get into groups, and they're going to be able to look at this Leadership Council on Civil and Human Rights website, which has a lot of information about the work that they're doing today on civil rights issues today in the United States. So, for example, if you click on one of the subsections and you look at inclusion and opportunity, so what are they fighting on education? So you go here to the education, and they're focused on discriminatory barriers that unfairly limit or deny educational opportunity. And so you can go through here and you can see what they mean by this and what work they're doing on sexual assault. It looks like preparing students for success. And these are where their focuses are. Either they're protesting, or they're lobbying, or they're providing funds, or they're providing scholarships. They're working with all of these different groups. And so the students are going to be able to get into the groups, and they're supposed to decide between them which of these issues, any of them under our work section, that they want to focus on. And then they're going to brainstorm what issues those issues present and how is best to go about them. Can you fix these things legislatively? Can you fix these things in the court system? Or do you need to do protests? Do you need to try to get corporations to make changes by not purchasing their products, by doing awareness campaigns so more people in the U.S. are aware of the topics? And these are all going to be important for them going forward. You see them all the time right now with Colin Kaepernick and Nike. You see that with Chick-fil-A. A lot of people protest with their pocketbooks these days, so that's going to be important for people to know about. And even actors, if they say something politically, people don't want to see their movies. So these are important things for students to be aware of as they go out into the real world. Under the unit resources, I have everything separated for them so that they can easily identify a lot of the material that we go through. And so here we have the Civil Rights Overview and Background Information. I have the section of Martin Luther King Jr., which has the Stanford University and the King Center. It also has the primary source material that we discussed earlier. I have the Supreme Court decisions for them to be able to go straight to them, and the main OEA website for them to explore. And I will teach them how to use this in the first lecture. I also have the videos, and I Have a Dream video that's a separate one if they want to watch it, that actually shows Dr. King's face. This doll test, which is actually in relation to the Brown versus Board of Education Supreme Court case, and this is a present day version of it. If anybody has a chance to go back and watch this, I recommend doing so, even if you're not doing a civil rights lecture. It's just a really important video that people of all walks of life should watch. It's kind of heartbreaking, actually. I also have the books and articles that have helped me in my learning and research here, that I don't really have any of them applied to any of the lessons, but they're just kind of there for information if the students want to learn some more. Going back to the assessments, here, as we talked about, we have the handout that they're going to be working on. There's also a group game, a Guess Who game, that we're going to do with current events, or with civil rights leaders about the current events. And we have here the research paper I discussed and the presentation. The essay will be the last thing that they need to do, and this is going to be on their equality campaign. They're going to take their equality campaign topic, and they're going to decide what connects that equality campaign topic to the civil rights movement in the 1960s, and they're going to write an individual argumentative essay on that topic. So this has been Veronica Grimier's Civil Rights Unit plan, and I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you so much.